Hello, my name is Joshua Paul, and I will be introducing net neutrality. So what exactly is net neutrality? Well, net neutrality is the idea that internet service providers, or ISPs, have to treat all internet traffic equally. This basically means that if Verizon has a partnership with Coca-Cola, they are not allowed to slow down Sprite ads to make sure their customers are more inclined to buy Coke products. It was a term coined by Columbia University law professor Tim Wu in 2003 as an extension of the Common Carrier Regulations. Many believe that net neutrality grew in focus after some ISPs were banning the use of VPNs or for the users setting up their own Wi-Fi routers. But in the next few slides, I will go into more depth onto its origins and the events that led to its repeal. So piggybacking on my earlier statement of net neutrality being an extension of previously established common carrier regulations, the term common carrier actually refers back to the early days of ancient Rome, when service providers were more focused on benefiting the community rather than huge profits. This concept fundamentally means that there are certain businesses and services critical to a working nation, so laws need to be processed to ensure non-discrimination. If you're wondering how this is linked to the internet, well, due to recent technological advancements, we're now in an age where the internet has created a bridge to all sorts of information and services, qualifying it as a common carrier. The next big step in the formulation of net neutrality was when President Franklin D. Roosevelt was signed into office and then signed into law the Communications Act of 1934. This established the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, whose job is to regulate industries of communication like telephone networks or the internet. Further down the line in 2002, FCC Chairman Michael Powell classifies the internet as a Title I interstate information service. After some concerns on ISPs banning users for using VPNs, the Bush administration's FCC acknowledged this issue and created a statement forbidding ISPs from blocking legal content. These events kickstarted the formulation of future net neutrality rules and also its eventual repeal. So starting down this timeline of net neutrality's repeal, on December 21st, 2010, Obama's administration's FCC adopted its first net neutrality regulations. These regulations required ISPs to be transparent about their rates and prohibited them from blocking or slowing down their customers' ability to view information. This was later struck down by federal court on June 14, 2014, and the FCC was given the mission to develop some new regulations for internet providers, but also they had to open the issue to the public for 4 months. After almost a year of negotiation, FCC's chairman Tom Wheeler classified broadband internet as a public utility. This required the government to apply the same regulations to the internet as they do landline telephones. On June 14, 2016, the U.S. Appeals Court approved this classification and required broadband internet to have equally attainable access for all their users. This decision also prohibited ISPs from charging for faster download speeds, which is good for everyone but the internet service providers. These victories for net neutrality were very momentary, as in 2016, Donald Trump was sworn into office and chose Jeffrey Eisenach as one of his transition aides when they were both known to be anti-net neutrality proponents. The next few slides about the net neutrality repeal will be done by one of my partners, Guzman. Thank you.
With the new administration in place on January 23, 2017, Trump appointed Republican Ajit Pai as the newest chairman, whom was the FCC commissioner and a former member of Verizon's general counsel. Pai did not beat around the bush in saying that he intended to repeal Obama's net neutrality rules that classified internet as a public utility. In the meantime, Congress sent the White House a piece of legislation that would remove privacy measures set up by the FCC that kept internet usage data private from internet service providers that would want to compile it and sell it to advertisers. While this didn't have to do with net neutrality, it signaled the FCC's new approach to letting businesses make money off consumers in new ways. But sure enough, wasting no time, on April 26, 2017, Ajit Pai, as the new FCC chairman, released his proposed regulation, outlining measures for internet service providers to require people to pay for access to certain websites. With new proposed regulation, May 18, 2017, the FCC votes to review Pi's proposed regulation of net neutrality. Pi's proposal was titled "Restoring Internet Freedom," but his definition of freedom was that large internet service providers will have the freedom to control the internet. As for the million consumers who use the services, many of whom don't have a choice of internet service providers, they won't have the freedom to visit websites they want because those websites will load slowly. It also meant that people won't have the freedom to start their own businesses online because their sites won't load as quickly as those established companies that pay to have their websites in an internet speed of fast lane. Net neutrality advocates and tech giant civil liberty activists, small business advocates came together to unite against Pi and the repeal of net neutrality regulations. At the Net Neutrality Day of Action, there were websites like Reddit and Netflix who displayed messages defending an open internet. Millions of comments were posted on the FCC system and hundreds of thousands signed petitions. Unfortunately, on June 11, 2018, the repeal of the FCC's rules took effect, ending network neutrality regulation in the United States.
Hi everyone, my name is Amar Chaudhary and I am going to talk about the advantages of net neutrality. The basic concept of net neutrality is that all traffic should be treated fairly, without penalizing or prioritizing traffic from a certain domain name, service provider, or publisher. People in favor of net neutrality, such as consumer advocates and human rights organizations, argue that it is critical to keep the internet unrestricted and free for everyone. Having free internet is essential for society and is important in affording a large number of opportunities. Some of the advantages are control of data, promoting free speech, end of user intolerance, promotion of competition and innovation, preservation of internet standards, investment in quality services. I am going to talk about first four advantages of net neutrality. First advantage is control of data. Internet service providers should not control content by giving preference to some sites or businesses and making the internet limited just like our cable TV services. People in favor of net neutrality suggest that the cable companies should work as common carriers so they can allow internet service providers to have free access to cable lines. It will ensure that the cable companies or internet service providers do not interrupt, screen, filter, or slow the delivery speed of the content. And it will also give consumer more control over what they get and what not, and takes away that control from internet service providers. Our second advantage is promoting free speech. Having net neutrality will promote free speech as internet service providers would not be able to block certain websites to promote their position on certain political aspect. It will ensure that the internet remains free and open source, and all the websites or blogs will be available as long as they are under legal terms. With open internet, people in the entire world would have voice online, and people will not just see the content that internet service providers want them to see. Otherwise, internet service providers could block access to content they don't want you to see, like a rival video streaming site or another site that competes with their own interest, and even content they deem as unsuitable. Our next advantage is going to be end of user intolerance. Users who have access to fast internet will become adapted and not tolerate slow access or loading of content. This would give disadvantages to people, businesses, or sites who are not able to pay to internet service providers to get faster services or faster lanes. And users with less tolerance would abandon the video sooner or just leave the website without waiting for its content to load. With net neutrality, all sites should be accessible at the same speed, and there would be no equality, which would balance the user intolerance. Our fourth advantage is promotion of competition and innovation. Having net neutrality will give equal chance to all businesses to promote their product and not let internet service provider make some businesses or websites more accessible than others. Businesses will have the opportunity to innovate and they will fail or succeed based on what they provide to customer, means based on the products they give and not based on deals with internet service providers. Without net neutrality, small businesses would not be able to afford to pay high costs to internet service provider to provide fast service to their users. And it will give another advantage to larger companies over tiny startup. It's a level playing field on the internet where everything should be delivered as fast as possible and everything should be equal.
Another advantage of net neutrality would be the preservation of internet standards, since they are key to allowing devices, services, and applications to work together across a wide network of networks. Net neutrality advocates have sponsored legislations claiming that authorizing network providers to override the transport and application layers preparation on the internet would signal the decline of fundamental internet standards and international consensus authority. With net neutrality, the organizations are all open, transparent, and rely on consensus building processes to develop standards. They help make sure we have open internet standards, freely accessible specifications that are unburdened, and also have an open development that is continuously evolving. Also, in the same legislation, it is stated that bit shaping the transport of application data will undermine the transport layer designed for flexibility. One of the remaining advantages is the investment in quality services. With net neutrality, companies invest in providing good quality services to consumers rather than paying to get special networks to reach end users faster. Having no net neutrality will lead to leveraging quality of services to extract remuneration from websites that want to avoid being slowed down. For example, with these new 5G wireless providers, they are ensuring that only prominent places have a better connection, rather than ensuring that there is quality of service equally. The quality of service is measured through certain tools to test a user's connection quality. It is usually done by the national regulatory authorities to detect any net neutrality violations. Thus, with net neutrality, companies can invest in quality services and consumers can decide what they want to see and not the internet service providers.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I'm going to be talking about disadvantages of net neutrality. Unwanted data mining. If there is no regulation, all of that data is up for grabs. This might be good for big companies and corporations that thrive on consumer data, such as behavior data, search engine preferences, and more. But for average consumers, this can seem like a massive invasion on privacy and an unwanted stealing of information. Calls could be monitored, chats could be checked, and file sharing could be looked into. Actions and behaviors of the internet would become easier to obtain than ever before. This is also bad news for companies who are paid to obtain this data or who collect it with the consumer consent and sell it to other platforms or services because they will no longer be needed. Illicit content is easily accessible. Questionable content can thrive in an internet that is not regulated by the federal government. Offensive, discriminatory, racist, and obscene content is easier to find and obtain without anyone policing the internet to make sure it is not there. Content is still regulated by ISPs, but providers with money will still be able to buy their way in. Opponents of net neutrality have also argued that the rules make it easier for underage users to access legal but age-sensitive pornography. While many software providers offer built-in tools for restricting access to certain services or websites, net neutrality opponents argue that these are ineffective, as many younger users will simply turn to their mobile devices, which they can use without adult supervision. Less network innovation. There has been a greater demand on bandwidth with the rise of more sophisticated internet services. This has forced the need for greater spend on capacity, which diverts funds away from service innovation. Net neutrality reduces investment in internet services, resulting in less access and higher costs for consumers. Net neutrality regulations also prevent ISPs from charging large content companies, such as video streaming services, additional fees to cover the cost of bandwidth they use. Preventing such paid prioritization fees places the cost of building the additional capacity necessary to carry the content onto ISPs, and these costs will trickle down to consumers in the form of more expensive internet packages, which are paid by all, even those who don't use the streaming services. Who is for and against net neutrality laws? Those in favor of free market and those in favor of small government intervention are immediately in favor of the repeal of net neutrality laws. This is because they believe that the government should intervene in as little ways as possible with everyday functions. And, as the internet has become something of daily use, they feel that it is up to businesses and states to decide what and how people should use the internet. There are obviously, of course, ISPs who want to see deregulations. This puts the ball in their court and lets them decide what content gets dispersed, who gets to see it, and for how much. This makes the internet a business, and the highest bidder would win. And those in favor of net neutrality regulations are those brands that deal with high bandwidth content, such as Netflix and Hulu, who require a lot to keep their sites up and running at maximum efficiencies. ISPs could charge them more and make their services run slower, thus cutting down their clientele. Big government people are also in favor of this because they think the government should be involved more closely with everyday goings-ons of the American people. And as a whole, internet users are generally for net neutrality. They don't want the content they have access to shrink or become increasingly biased. They don't want to lose access to services, and they certainly don't want to pay more for the ones that they love.
Violations of net neutrality. Net neutrality violations have happened as far back as 2005, when a Canadian ISP called TELUS blocked a server for hosting information about a labor strike against them, also causing collateral damage by blocking over 700 unrelated websites. The first example of a major US ISP violating net neutrality is in 2007, where Comcast started blocking peer-to-peer sharing technology such as BitTorrent. BitTorrent is used for pirated software sometimes, but also has legitimate uses. AT&T was next, blocking Skype in 2007 because it was a competitor to phone calls. Skype is a service that provides its users with video calls over the internet, and AT&T did not want people to start using Skype over its regular phone calls. AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon all blocked Google Wallet in 2011 because it was a competitor to their new similar mobile wallet called ISIS. They all had a hand in creating ISIS and wanted users to use their software instead, so they could be the ones in control of the money. In 2018, Verizon throttled firefighters' connection to the internet during a wildfire. The firefighters relied on a vehicle that was meant for command and control in large instance, so having reliable and fast internet access was vital for communication. Its internet speed was reduced from 50 megabytes per second down to 30 kilobytes per second, a reduction of over 99% of their speed. Firefighters were told to pay more if they wanted the speed to go back up. To make matters even worse, firefighters had paid for unlimited access because they did not want this exact situation to happen. After the news broke, Verizon faced heavy backlash. Verizon went into PR disaster mode and claimed that the issue was customer service and that the agent should have unthrottled after being told to. However, an actual emergency is a life and death situation, and the firefighters should not need to wait on the line until Verizon customer support chooses to unblock their services. In a very recent event, on November 23, 2020, Comcast announced that they would begin charging people more for exceeding a data cap of 1.2 terabytes per month. This is also a violation of net neutrality because it puts an arbitrary cap on the access people have to the internet, rather than just giving users the speeds they pay for. These violations prove that ISPs cannot be trusted to regulate themselves in a way that is fair to the people. They have chosen to block news that is unfavorable to them, peer-to-peer sharing software like BitTorrent, services that are competitors that could take away some of their market share, and firefighters during a real fire, possibly causing bodily harm and death. Therefore, net neutrality should be reinstated as protection from these abusive ISPs. Closing statement. What can we do? BattleForTheNet.com is the main resource for people in the U.S. to contact their representatives in Congress to restore net neutrality. There are more resources on the website, like some pre-written letters to send your political representatives. Sending other people the website and more information will inform more people and sway more politicians until there is enough political will to force net neutrality.